There have been people in my life that I've worked with that I haven't really jammed with or got along with for whatever reason. You butt heads, especially in a creative world, right? There's always different ideas and stuff. But then there's one thing that always comes down to is I always try to find out, okay, what kind of music do they like?
Yeah.
Like, how do we get past this part where we're kind of knocking heads a little bit? And hey, what are you into? Because right now we're knocking heads, but there's something there.
There's got to be
something there. We just got to
somewhere.
get to it. And then that helps us work through everything else.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Why Music Matters podcast. I'm your host, music journalist and musician Jeff Myers. Throughout my life in and around music, I've often asked myself the question, why does music matter? This podcast will attempt to answer that question with the help of musicians, members of the music industry, and music lovers like you. Today on Why Music Matters, I'm joined by Buffalo Sabres play-by-play announcer Dan Dunleavy. In addition to his considerable game calling skills, Dan is a dyed-in-the-wool music lover with an enduring passion for artists as diverse as Elvis Presley and Eddie Van Halen, the Tragically Hip and AC/DC. Throughout our chat, Dan offers some insight on the connections between music and sports, a lifetime's worth of musical obsessions, and how music has helped him through his darkest days. Welcome to Why Music Matters, Dan Dunleavy. Hey everybody, welcome to Why Music Matters. I'm your host, Jeff Myers. I'm honored today to have Buffalo Sabres play-by-play announcer, music lover, dog lover.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Animal lover.
Animal lover,
planet lover, all of it. Yeah.
And all around just great dude, Dan Dunleavy. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, yeah.
We've spoken over the years, but it's the first time we met in person.
Yeah, you know, when we all have friends in our lives. Sometimes people have 500 friends. Some people have 20, 50. I've got probably a handful of friends that I sometimes don't talk to for a year, but when I do, it's like you never, ever
definitely have some of those.
Miss touch.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of one of those things where, and I think part of that comes with working in different cities and moving around quite a bit, right? But when I first got here, just, for people that are watching, listening, and obviously I'd mentioned to you when I saw you outside, I don't know what it was, but when I started reading and seeing your work and understanding what you were all about, I just thought, something about this dude that I think I would really get along with. And then seeing what you would do, and I didn't get to any of the events in the city, I just thought, there's something about the vibe here that I think is just really cool. So credit to you for the work you've done, because that's why I'm sitting here right now, because I know we reached out through social media.
Yes.
And I was like, Jeff, I really like your work, man. And I don't do that. It's interesting. I don't do that for lots. I don't know if it's a generational or getting older thing, but there's definitely a change in attitude towards how information is put out. I think there's a lot more emphasis on swift compared to researched.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I really liked about your work is, and still do, is that it's extremely well researched and there's no rush to get it out. It's a rush for quality, which sometimes takes time, which in essence is
well, I am completely
music,
flattered.
Right? No, but I mean,
to hear you
because,
say all this, I really appreciate it.
Some
man.
people are in such a rush to pick up the phone and get the info out without actually telling the story. That, I get the 140 character world we live in now. I'm not shunning it because we're in it.
No, we're in it, and no sense.
But there's depth to our lives here. And
well, there needs to be. And
your work brought it, or brings it.
Right on, man. Well, thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
That means a lot to
you're
me.
You're welcome.
I've been a fan of yours equally, all along, and I dreamed about, we should get into a deep, whether it's over a beer or whatever.
Yeah,
we have to have a talk sometime.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I heard you, at the beginning of a broadcast, introducing the Knights goaltenders and citing the Tragically Hips at the lonely end of the rink. And I'm like, all right, this dude is totally cool. I love this immediately. You're a music guy.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this a little bit at a couple different times, mostly through social media and texting or whatever. But I want to know a little bit about, growing up in and around Toronto,
Right.
How you fell in love with music, maybe about, if any early memories you have of that, and also, what role music plays in your life today, which is a very full life.
Yeah, it is. Well, I can tell you what, even as you asked the question, because it's funny, driving in, I thought, I'm not nervous about the interview, but how's it going to start off, and am I going to remember? That's when I sit down to talk to someone, you walk away from conversation. Oh, I forgot to mention this.
Oh, yeah. Always.
But as soon as you mentioned where the love for music came from, it actually jumped right into my mind. And actually, the name of a musician, instrument player that only your purest music people will know, Boots Randolph.
Wow.
That my dad would have albums like that in his old wooden console stereo with the little curtains over the speakers, and you had to lift the lid, and it was a Philips. That was, on every picture of me as a little infant to a kid walking around with a soap on a rope, my mom would tell me that you were always singing, you were always trying to perform or something, which I've never done on stage other than what I do for a living is performing to an extent, right? But musically for me, it was my dad would sit down at the piano, and he never, ever read a sheet of music in his life, never took a music lesson. So he was one of these guys that would sit down and we had a piano, an old upright piano in the basement. I grew up in Georgetown, Ontario, 45 minutes west of Toronto. Dad was a City of Toronto firefighter. And in those days, you could live 45 minutes outside of Toronto. He could be at work in half an hour. That doesn't exist
those days
anymore,
are over.
Right? Doesn't exist anymore. But he'd come home from work, and I quickly learned in life that as many things as when we're kids that we don't like about our parents, there's other things that we really admire. And for me, for what I admired about my dad, he would come home and he would just start playing. He would jam on the keyboards, and and I'd look at him in amazement thinking, where are you getting this from? And
he could hear it.
He would just hear it. Exactly. He said, I don't know. I just hear it. And he really didn't give it any extra attention either. He never flaunted it. He never told anybody about it. He would just come home, sit down. He might pour himself a beer and a shot or something, sit down and just start going. And I really would. There were times where some things, he would say something sometimes I would question, even as a teenager growing up, as we all get into our years of questioning our parents and how they're doing things.
It's part of the job.
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
it's part of the path, man. And but one thing I never questioned was this guy loves music.
Yeah.
And Dad and my mom both got into musical theater when I was in my teenage years, and I was very nervous for them both when I would go see them perform, especially Dad.
Yeah.
He loved to sing, and he'd get on stage and perform, and I remember being so afraid for him as if he was my child. And then when he'd nail it, I'd be so proud, thinking, this is really cool.
That is
so that's where
cool.
the love of music comes from. So the Boots Randolph and a whole bunch of just a really wide, array of old school, or we call it old school now, but an era of music that was really, I'm going to say, just really pure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mario Lanza was someone that my mom would listen to all the time. So those albums were around. So I'd go from Boots Randolph to Mario Lanza and this is the big one. This is what got me into it, and this is not going to surprise anybody, was Elvis Presley. So my first album I ever owned in my lifetime was Elvis Presley's Flaming Star from the movie. And it might be the one, someone who looks back on Elvis's career might think, well,
that's not the one.
That's not the one.
It's the first one you got.
Yeah, you got that one, kind of cheesy or whatever. But the song in Flaming Star, I'm right now. And there's something about that Flaming Star over our shoulders that is really cool. That we all have that.
Yeah.
So even now, just thinking about that, that's my start in music was Elvis. And then as I got more, I was more educated on Elvis, and Dad had tons of Elvis records. And then I just started buying Elvis records all the time. Yeah. And it's interesting, the tie-in here to now. I was talking with our owner, Terry Pagula, about maybe a month ago at the rink. And I was talking to him about my complete obsession with the Beatles right now.
Yeah. Is that new for you?
It is, and we'll get to that. It's really interesting.
Wow.
I mentioned that to him and how I listen to the Beatles channel on Sirius XM 24/7. I really don't touch any other channel except the NHL Network and then the NFL. I'll get my information. But musically, where I used to be the hair metal, heavy metal, all those songs have history and some blues riffs and everything,
absolutely.
and classical riffs and all that I would always kind of brag to my mom, you should hear this, and this
Right.
came from this,
And it did.
try to justify it to my parents,
Yeah.
right? But now, right now, it's kind of the Beatles thing for me. And the
You
lesson,
cannot go wrong.
well, what I'm learning about music is amazing.
It's-
that I just kind of glossed over as a kid.
It's what ruined my life,
Yeah.
or saved it
In a good way, right?
Yeah.
So, but the Elvis thing I mentioned to Terry about the Beatles, he says, well, for me, it's Elvis Presley. He says that man could sing anything. And when you think about it, he really could.
Oh yeah,
You put anything in front of him and he could just knock it out of the park. And even when he was not at his best physically, nor mentally probably because of
No.
what was going on and
Right.
shouldering what it was to be one man in that spotlight with good and probably bad advice all around him, he could still, he's sitting there singing. He's got the blue suit on. I can see the towel and he's sweating.
and he's
probably
puffy and not
probably
well.
a little bit dying inside because, the soul has just been sucked right out of him. But the depth of his love for music, as soon as he opened his mouth and sang, it was still there. So for me,
so much.
yeah, that's my start as Elvis, and I just thought it was interesting how Terry had mentioned to me, or Mr. Pagula, that that's his guy that can just sing anything. So those are my roots. And then the very first 45 I ever owned, for the generation that doesn't know what a 45 is, and I know you've already spoken to them probably many times, but was Hart's Barracuda.
Oh yeah,
And it was strictly for that guitar riff. And it was then and there that I knew I'm a guitar guy.
yeah.
So, and it was nothing against synthesizer
No, that's all
or
cool.
what was to become new wave music. Just for me, it was the chunk, chunk,
Yeah.
chunk, 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 and then the high pitch.
Yeah.
How'd you get that out of that thing? So, that's my background of how it all started.
And I'm sure that led to Led Zeppelin eventually, right? Because it's pretty similar.
Yeah, eventually it did, but the first. I don't want to go on too much on, if you're going another direction on the question, but musically it went from there for me right to Van Halen.
yeah.
And the reason is, and it still is today, and it's part of the reason why I'm really hooked on the Beatles thing now, is the harmony for me is my hook.
Yeah.
Now, along with the guitar. So that's why even for a kid growing up, I'd be listening to Poison and stuff like that, where musically people would argue it's not really the most complex music out there.
But it's so hooky.
But there are hooks to it that I think, okay, if I'm giving my next 3.5 minutes of my life to something, I want to feel like singing along to it and I want to have a smile on my face.
Yeah.
That was Eddie Van Halen.
Oh,
So he could do no
So
wrong.
true.
And that's my guy. I had a friend come up to me once and he said, be careful who you idolize. They don't have halos over the heads,
Right.
and I would say, I get that. They're rock stars, but as far as how they make me feel when they play their music, or
there
if
was such unbridled joy.
Yeah,
every
and now
time
I know
he
more-
touched the guitar.
oh my
you know?
gosh, yeah. And now when you know more about, you see David Lee Roth today compared to what he was when he was in his glory days with the band then. I don't want to take away from who he is.
No.
But it's just
He's a riot.
completely different. He is a riot, but I look at him these days and I think, okay, it was always about you.
Yeah.
But even when Eddie got sick, he made it a lot about himself. And that kind of turned me off a little bit. But it was always about the fun. And
Yeah.
all over Georgetown, Ontario, in a building that used to be called Zeller's, there are Van Halen logos stenciled on every wall that I would draw as a kid when I was working there as a stock boy.
How cool.
They're just everywhere. So that's my guy. And so, it really just led, I think, and that came from the Boots Randolphs and the Elvis Presleys, and just, it seemed like they were having fun doing their thing.
Yeah.
Without getting into the murky waters of what was going on in their lives, the product to me, which is still true today, the product to me is what matters. Then learning the backstory to the music is now what I'm so fascinated about. Because as a kid, I didn't give it the time of day. I just wanted to hear the song. Now I'm thinking, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And that's where,
Beatles thing.
but that's where, as you would do your gigs at
absolutely.
at the local, I forget what club it was at, and you would play an
Yeah,
album.
the Sportsman's Tavern.
Yeah, and I thought I need to be there.
Well, we're bringing it back.
Are
again,
you?
so
Awesome. Good
I'll
stuff.
let you know.
Yeah, because
Hopefully-
I'm very much a sponge right now. I want to learn. I think all of us as human beings walking this planet, we love music.
Yeah.
To the extent that we chase the love and want to learn about it, is
Yeah.
at the right time in our lives it will happen. So for me, it was I even got Disney Plus to watch.
To
the
watch
Beatles.
Get Back
Yeah,
with
to
Peter
watch Get
Jackson.
Back. And as it was happening, to sit there and watch that and see the process of they don't have the lyrics to the songs yet that you already know. It just blew my mind.
It's so crazy.
And my wife loves music, but she's not watching every music documentary like I am. And I'm sitting at home just wanting, look, they don't know the words to the song yet. This is amazing. She's like, okay, great. What are we having for dinner or whatever. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And that's probably why we've connected, because I know you're going to be, for me, a source of that. Here's the backstory. And that, for me, listening to the Beatles channel right now is all about listening to all the hosts talk about their connections to the band, the productions, and then so you say you want an evolution, that part. It's like the evolution of the song and going, this is what I need right now.
It's so great.
Right? Here's the spaghetti and meatballs, but how did you make it so good?
That's right. Exactly.
Give me the recipe. So,
with Get Back, I mean, my earliest memory is hearing Let It Be, the album.
Right.
That my parents had.
Yeah.
And that's still, it's just so much tied to like any conception I have of who I am in my life, And so seeing that, because, the film Get Back is about what eventually became that album. Was, I guess, like, a literature scholar might be like, it was like watching a documentary of Shakespeare writing.
Right. Yeah, before he's come up with it, and you're
totally
watching the thought
like
process.
He's like, what should I call this? Romeo and I don't have it yet.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was just mind blowing.
Yeah.
But now that you're in the Beatles, you're never getting out, man.
But the thing is, once you're in, you don't want to get out.
You don't.
There's something so very positive about their music. And it's funny, Maxwell Silverhammer, the more I've heard about the story behind the song, and I never, it's kind of a fun, quirky song, and it is very different, but I really do like the evolution of the Beatles. And my parents never did have Beatles albums. That was the one band. So it's interesting. It was all Elvis. And some jazz and stuff like that. But the Beatles, I knew they were there, but I was very much in the Elvis house.
Yeah.
And then when the Beatles are coming along and you'd hear all the back and forth a little bit about, well, who's the ultimate superpower of music? I didn't side with one, but I knew about Elvis because I did grow up in that house. Now, in my life where I've kind of made that decision to I need to dive into this a bit more because it's so part of everything, but I don't really know I know how it emerged and how it came from the Cavern Club and all this stuff, and they were neighbors, but how did it all get connected, and then how did it grow? Not where did it go wrong, but how did it evolve? Because I don't see anything that changes as going wrong necessarily.
Yeah.
I think it's an easy way to look at things. I just see it literally as it says a lot of times on the show of you want an evolution. Yeah. It's just an evolution, especially musically of bands. A lot of times talk about bands breaking up. I don't like to refer to bands as artists as breaking up, as more as to just growing.
Yeah.
And that growth doesn't always mean that we're side by side.
You don't always get to grow together.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I've kind of looked at the whole Beatles picture. And then one day I just decided to listen to the Beatles channel on Sirius and just stick with it. And I'll just stick with it, see what you learn. And then even when they start playing the show where John Lennon, these are the bands that John Lennon would listen to. Yeah. And there's bands I'd never heard of. And I'm thinking, how have you not heard of these bands? They influenced the Beatles. They influenced the music of your life today.
Totally. Chuck Berry, the Everly Brothers.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Buddy Holly,
those are the easy ones.
Right.
I know them, but there are some other bands that I can't even think of right now. And I knew when I was coming in to talk to you, I should have jotted some down that they would just say, and John would listen to this band. And I'd never heard of them before, but the song was actually really catchy. And I could, now knowing a bit more about John, I could understand, I could see this is his kind of role right here and how it influenced what he was doing up to a certain point, and then he evolved. So, I'm really into that evolution of that band.
Well, I have some books for you to borrow.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I won't be able to put them down, which is really cool. The best book I ever read, to go completely off, we're still into music. People ask you, what's the best book you ever read? And I've read some Paulo Coelho books about just how we understand ourselves better in life and on the path and the alchemist and the pilgrimage and all that stuff, which again, as a little heavy metal kid growing up in Georgetown, Ontario, I never thought I'd ever read. Didn't think I'd ever have the attention span for it. But I found a time in my life where those books were talking to me about becoming a young man and accepting
evolution.
Yeah, your own evolution. And Don Miguel Ruiz is another one, and the Four Agreements and all this stuff. So, but the book that I will say probably till I take my last breath on this planet, you're going to laugh your arse off, that I will never forget and I could not put down, and I still get excited about, and it's, I don't know why, but The Dirt by Motley Crue was probably the most blow my mind book I've ever read, probably because it's a life we always dreamed of living as rock and roll wannabes.
Sure, and coming of age in the sort of hair metal 80s,
you know? Gosh. But then reading what it was really like with, I can't think there'd be a music fan that hasn't read it, listening or watching your show or have seen your work in the past, but that every single band member told their own version of every story without the other members knowing what was written.
Yeah.
And then it was all thrown together to the extent of, hey, I was with your fiance and you didn't know. Like,
that book is something else.
It just blew my mind.
It's got the right name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's not like musical genius came from it, but in their own way, they navigated through something that I don't know if I would have survived.
It's easy to judge if you haven't gone through that. And that was a particular time and place. And
so there you go. Our discussion has gone from Boots Randolph to Motley Crue.
To Motley Crue with a stop in the Beatles. Well, we'll come back to more of this kind of thing. But I wanted to ask you, you know, in this podcast, we try to get at why music matters, as it's called, and how it can almost transcend itself to be something more, you know? And I wanted to ask you about what I perceive anyway is the sort of similarities between music and sports, and beyond the obvious, like how they're connected. Sure, people use music to get psyched for a game, athletes and fans, you know, or, you know, a goal song, TNT. The rest of them, they could use a little help. But anyway, for me, that connection has always been more about, in both, you need to learn how to be part of something bigger than yourself, right? It's like, in a way, you develop your craft to such a point where you're a virtuoso, and then you need to learn how to make that virtuosity sing with your teammates, right? And for me, there's a metaphor in that can be applied, you know, to life. I want to know if you think I'm out on a limb here, or if you see it and you feel it too.
No, I do. I think the more I've understood going through the years here of figuring out who I am, you know, knowing what I like, but who are you? And you always think and this is where the, you know, the Paulo Coelho writings really came into play about, especially The Alchemist and the Pilgrimage, where you have a plan laid out for what you think you want to do, or what you, at that point in time, you know you want to do, or what you want to be as a human being, or in your profession, or in your artistry life, whatever it is. And then having the understanding that, you know, for me, the first time I picked up a guitar, I think I was either 39 or 40. And knowing myself like I do now, and I always did, obviously, like we know ourselves from day one. Understanding ourselves might be a different thing, because we don't put the brakes on and take that time, right? So I think this is what you might be getting at a little bit, where you kind of start to put the brakes on life a little bit, and you start to connect things about yourself, yes, to what you're doing, and to your partners in life, to your friends in life, and you start to find these connections that work for you, and then you start to find these connections that maybe have a bit of more of a bumpier road, and then you try to find a way to navigate them a bit better. Music for me has really helped that. There have been people in my life that I've worked with that I haven't really jammed with or got along with for whatever reason. You butt heads, especially in a creative world, right? There's always different ideas and stuff. But then there's one thing that always comes down to is I always try to find out, okay, what kind of music do they like? Like, how do we get past this part where we're kind of knocking heads a little bit? And hey, what are you into? Because right now we're knocking heads, but there's something there.
There's got to be
something there. We just got to get to it. And then that helps us work through everything else. So that's what I've learned. And then the Paulo Coelho stuff was always about when you get on this path and you think that A to B is a straight line, and then you find out that very quickly that straight line has taken you over here where you didn't expect to be, and on a completely different path, and then just kind of accepting that, okay, I thought I wanted to be here, creatively or professionally or personally, but I was actually, you need to understand, no, this is where you were going all along. You just didn't see it. And it sounds, when you're not ready to your point, you're not ready to accept that discussion, you might fluff it off and just think, whatever, it's a bunch of stuff that's written in books.
Sure.
But once you open yourself up to, there might be something to this, and maybe it could be a reason why I'm not just feeling right about something, or I feel like I'm always fighting something, or you think people are always giving you the short end of the stick, or why is nothing ever working out for me, or why am I waiting this long to get this opportunity? I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. But once you start to figure out that there's just going to be a time and a place that this stuff's all going to work, as long as you apply your love for whatever you're doing, if it's a true love for whatever you do, music or otherwise, it's going to happen. It just might happen over here instead of over here, but it's happening. So see it, stop and see it. So that's kind of what I've learned about, and that's what music has taught me. And the more, in watching any music documentary about bands, especially when they're piecing together, like we're talking about the Beatles, I can only imagine how many times, and I'm sure, and I keep digging for more archival footage of every discussion, every word spoken between those four, every battle, every fight they've had, every time they've gotten along to figure out how they navigated to get to what was really simplicity greatness.
Yeah.
And John Lennon talks about that, right? You know better than I, but I forget who it was, said they were talking to John about writing, and John said, well, it's really simple. I just say what you want to say and find a rhyme. Yeah. Don't complicate it. And that was his, at least early on in his career. Then he got to more messaging about, what he wanted to make a difference in the world and with the planet and stuff. But early on, it was,
Make it rhyme.
Make it rhyme.
Odds are it's about love.
And go there, yeah. So, and I know Paul talks about that too a lot. They're both fascinating to me, and all four of them are fascinating.
Yeah,
to me,
absolutely.
That's a long way to answer your question, but there's definitely a connectivity between music and understanding ourselves. Yeah, and also understanding other problems. Like even getting in here, the parking meter, right? Right. So for those that don't know, I'm trying to make my card work. And first of all, the machine, it didn't work. And then on my phone, I can't get the app to work with the credit card, all this stuff that, let it be. It has nothing to do with the song, but it kind of does. Yeah. Where you've just learned to let it be, whatever.
Yeah, you didn't seem bent.
If I get a ticket on there at the end of the day,
oh man, I don't want Dan to get a ticket while we're doing this.
I took my wallet out of the car in case I get towed, but other than that, but yeah, I just think, every lesson for me, and again, it started with Dad jamming on the piano. Dad and I did not always get along. Yeah. It was not an easy father-son. There's a lot of things that I look back on that I don't want to be, thanks to him being the guy he probably didn't want to be sometimes. But the one thing I admired about him was the music, and that music put me on the path to literally walking around the house singing every day. There's not a day I don't write a song. I haven't written it down yet, but there's not a day I don't sit. And my wife will say to me, Brenda says, who are you talking to? I swear to goodness.
I'm composing.
I swear to goodness, when you meet Brenda one day, she's going to tell you, this guy never stops talking around the house. I've written I wrote a really good one the other day too. I thought, this is it. This is amazing.
You got to record.
You need to write
ideas.
This down. Yeah, I had this. It was a great line. Something about being in the moment, being in the life, being in the minute, being in the second. Like every musician's probably written the same thing.
There's always a fresh take on it.
But that's the thing. Yeah. It was my take on it. It was just really cool. So, yeah.
So you've been playing guitar and for a while now, and you can you can play enough so that you can write a song and
I can
get enjoyment for yourself.
I'm not to the point yet where I'd walk in here and start playing for you, but I'm certainly at the point where, and actually this is another thing about acceptance. It's funny. Brenda would tell you that you sound really good. So yes, I'm the guy who picked up a guitar at 40. It was not a midlife thing. It was literally just in the moment. I thought, why haven't I done this?
Yeah, I love it so much.
Why haven't I done this? So piano lessons for me, probably like a lot of us, right? When we were kids, I can see it now, sitting at the big upright piano in Georgetown, Ontario, living room window to the left, sun is shining. There's some snow on the ground, and I'm sitting there playing Mary Had a Little Lamb or whatever from my lessons. And I was hating it because it wasn't Boots Randolph. It wasn't
Right.
Elvis Presley. It wasn't Hart Barracuda. None of this was happening. And I thought, no, I already wanted to fast forward to learn how to play music I liked.
Yeah.
I didn't give a rat's whatever
Yeah.
about Mary Had a Little Lamb. I
Sure.
knew why. I knew why. I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to, but that's probably because of my father, right?
Yeah.
He never read. If he read music, he probably would have had me reading music from day one. But he sat down and jammed and started going dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun 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 dun. I'm going,
Yeah, playing Boogie Woogie. I mean,
and
that's
I
pretty
wanted my
cool.
piano teacher to play that
Yeah.
with me too. No, we don't do it that way.
No, we got to
you know.
teach you to read.
Exactly.
And play in time.
So, and then I'm looking out my window and all my buddies are out playing street hockey.
Right.
Street hockey won.
Yeah.
You know,
It has
and
a
I
tendency
look,
to.
I know, but I look back and I wish it didn't, because then I see the story. You know, I obviously have listened to Elton John through his entire career, and then seeing his documentary and hearing him tell his story or the movie about it,
Yeah.
and just thinking, oh, if you just stuck with it, you wouldn't have been Elton John necessarily, but at least you could sit down and start playing Tiny Dancer or something
Right.
without even thinking about it. So there was that kind of regret for me a little bit
Yeah.
as I got older, and I think a lot of us maybe have it. So I picked up the guitar. I went and I bought a Barracuda Strat, and it was a little Laney amp.
Yeah.
It was $150 for both at a shop in Burlington, Ontario. Then I walked in and I said to the guy, I said, look, I probably should have done this since I was probably, I don't know, at least 10 years old, if not definitely 13 years old.
Sure.
And I would have been killing it by now. And I still had the attitude today, thinking, oh, I would have could have been somebody. So he said, well, let's go this route. And I said, I didn't want to spend hundreds and hundreds, because what if I don't stick with it?
Right.
Knowing that guitar is a different animal. You got to stick
It
with
is.
this a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah.
And so I got that, and then I had I sought out someone to give me some lessons, because I knew I can't just pick this up and pretend I know what I'm doing. And at that point, YouTube was not it was out
Right.
there, but it wasn't as big.
Now it's a
Where
really
now
good resource.
you can
Yeah.
just learn how to play guitar right there, right in your home, so without anyone coming in. But I had a guy come to the house in Burlington after I bought it, and at that time I don't know how many years I'd been at the Fan, but I was at the Fan 590 in Toronto for 20 years.
Yeah.
And just doing afternoon updates, and then some World Junior Hockey Championships and World Hockey Championships and Olympics and stuff like that. So anyone in the GTA who is any kind of sports fan had heard your voice. And
Yeah.
again, it's not something that's like yourself. You don't think of that stuff, but then people cross your path and they go, especially at a restaurant,
Yeah.
you go to pay for something and they say,
I
are
know you.
Yeah, it's just from the voice, which is really, on the receiving end, it's kind of odd, but it happens. So one day I invited this guy over, and he's a guitar teacher, and he brought his big gray binder full of notes and stuff. And I said, okay, here we go. Like, if you want to learn, this is how you got to do it. But it became more, for the hour lesson, the first half hour was nothing but, hey, you're Jeff Myers.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm here teaching Jeff Myers, man. This is so cool.
Yeah.
And it became an interview with Dan Dunleavy instead of teaching Dan how to play guitar.
Oh, that is hilarious.
So
dude.
it was, I felt bad because I thought, okay, I get it, but even for me, I would say you're not sitting down with Rick Jenneret. I mean, at that point in my career, I was just not just starting out, but I certainly I didn't view myself in that kind of,
Right.
if someone walked in and Rick Jenneret wanted to learn how to play guitar.
Sure.
Imagine someone from Buffalo walking in thinking, am I allowed to tell anybody I'm doing this?
Yeah.
This is pretty cool. So it got to a point where I thought, you know what, maybe I do have to learn this on my own.
Yeah.
Because he gave me the book with all the pages in it and all the exercises and everything from blues runs to every run that you're supposed to learn. And so from there, I just started kind of going through the sheets, learning on my own, practicing a little bit, but not a lot, because I was traveling a lot,
Sure,
working the
yeah.
job. And then like a lot of people, I found Marty Schwartz on YouTube, who at least taught me that you can learn any song you want.
Yeah.
You put time and effort in, you can learn any song you want. And that took me right back to that kid at the piano, thinking, if that teacher had understood, and this is how I would actually say to any teacher, if you walk into a house, and it was in our house, and you see a big mirror of Elvis Presley above
Yeah.
the organ,
You're getting a vibe of what
well,
is going on here.
teach the kid how to
Yeah.
play the first two notes of All Shook Up or something. Get them excited. Get them
You're so correct.
excited, and then let's say, okay, you're going to play Hound Dog or All Shook Up on the piano by the end of next week. First, we need to do this.
Yeah.
Now I'm all in.
Now you've got a goal.
Now I'm all in. But Mary Had a Little Lamb, and then you're coming back next week, and we're going to do whatever song. I just wasn't buying that.
I understand. Anytime I've been in, a position to, help young people learn music, I've always approached it from like, what are you into? Mm-hmm. And let's get you there so that you feel a connection to this. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then we'll learn why it works, and there's a place to go.
Well, I've got one for you. Yeah. So how connected are you? How connected are you, or how easy has it been for you to stay connected with what's happened in music? Let's say over the last, I'll just mention decade.
Yeah.
And I bring it up because I feel extremely disconnected with. Now I don't have any kids in my life. It didn't work out. But I think part of that serves why I don't know a lot of Taylor Swift song. I know who Taylor Swift is. I get it. And if I hear a song, that's Taylor Swift. Yeah. But I don't know it's her until someone says that's a Taylor Swift song.
Well,
so has it been easy to stay connected with it for you? Or?
I think it's harder for everyone to stay connected right now because for people, of our age or younger, there's no central hub. I mean, we grew up with radio, right?
Right.
We did. And a lot of us heard the same things, There's no centralized hub now. With streaming, you can find anything you want to, but you have to know to look for it. I think people have trouble with that, and it's easy there's more music than ever.
Yeah.
It's probably harder to find what's going to appeal to you. I'm nuts. I mean, so I dig for this stuff, and I have a son who's now 23. He's a professional musician. It's my only kid, so he's taught me a ton. But it's work. But anyone who says there's no great music anymore just hasn't heard it yet, because there is.
Right.
And there's so much, and there's so much that would appeal to people like us, even based on loving Elvis, the Beatles, and, rock and hard rock, know.
Yeah.
It's out there.
I think you bring up a great point, and I think you're 100% right. We all would go to, even if we weren't, so in Toronto growing up, you were a Q107 or Chum FM guy when Chum FM was playing rock. And then obviously at one point you had an era where 102.1 CFNY was the station
Spirit of radio.
Yeah, the Spirit of Radio was the new music that was coming through. And so you still, even though I wasn't a CFNY music guy, because once in high school I found we all embedded ourselves. Like we literally chose our tribes.
Definitely.
Right? So the tribe was, you were Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, and rock. If you were country, you were way over here, because it was way different. I like the country from back then better than now, personally. Not that
it sounds more like country music.
It just, there's some soul to it. And I think now everyone's sitting on a tailgate drinking a beer, which I don't want to take away from the talent. I just find that the writing is, I got my hat on backwards and
it's
I can
cliche
drink beer.
written.
Yeah,
at
exactly.
This point,
So that's why, Anyway, and then you had, your CFNY, where all of a sudden,
the Cars and Devo, or whatever.
Well, that might be. So there were some bands that would bridge it, right?
The
Cars, Devo, and Nash the Slash. And you had some that were FM, and you're thinking, all right, I can do some of this. And then there'd be some bands that, Depeche Mode and that, which now I listen to it thinking, it's
great.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Back then, no, I didn't.
That's not in my tribe.
I didn't hang out with Depeche Mode people. It's like, no,
that's synth music.
That's right. You're at that table for lunch. We're having our fries and gravy and I had a jean jacket that had Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast Tour T-shirt that I cut, and I had it stitched on the back of my jacket. Yeah, and trying to describe Iron Maiden to people who hadn't seen Iron Maiden. It's interesting, but
I went through the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have ultimate respect for that.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying is true, though. I still knew that if I wanted to learn about new music, I knew where to go.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to learn a lot listening to CFNY. If I listened to Q107, I was going to get from Bob Makowitz and all these guys on the 6 o'clock rock report, all the stories about Rush 2112, how it came about, all this stuff. So you're right. I do think that we had our places to go, And if you wanted to kind of venture over, you could always take a few moments to learn something.
That's right.
Where I'm finding now is that where do I go for it?
Yeah.
It's just, you're right. There's so much of it out there that I don't know where to go. And
It's
a lot of
hard.
it, it's funny. You mentioned the players' goal songs.
Yeah.
Some of it is the players' goal songs because their
Yeah.
warm up, one thing about arena rock, right, was always the same music all the time.
Sure.
Now we're into a generation where it's their music. So
Yeah.
the players control what we're hearing in the pregame skate because it's they're firing up for the game. We might want to hear Thunderstruck and all the
Right.
classics and all that
But they
stuff.
want to hear, they want to hear hip hop. They want to hear
Stuff I've never
Kendrick.
heard of
Yeah.
before, yeah, and stuff that I would just think, and even on the plane, I don't know what they listen to on the plane, but I hear it in behind us on the flight, and it's got this kind of same beat all the time. It's just click, 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 click,
Yeah, that's a trap beat.
and
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh my God, that would drive me crazy. But I'm not hearing the whole, so I'm just hearing it behind me a little bit,
Right.
right? If I sat up and played Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast album or any other, and all they could hear was Bruce screaming, they'd
Right.
probably think, turn that crap off. So
It's
you know,
funny.
it
but
is. Yeah. It's
And
really
and
cool.
if you do the deep dive on, you start to hear the artistry and the nuance in it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
But I do think that part of the problem, not that we want to go on and on about this forever,
Well, this is an
without
8-part
beer.
interview. That's all right.
is I think there's the industry has become so much market directly to people in their bubbles and so demographic driven that we're all losing out on our ability to reach across the aisle and learn about things
Yeah.
that we don't know we like yet.
Or even to choose.
Yeah,
It's
to
almost like
choose.
someone's, especially in this era of AI, which
Yeah,
is
scary.
when we're long and gone, who knows what that's going to be like. But it's almost as if we're kind of there. You're right. They're telling you through clicks you're going to like this song. You haven't even decided that yourself.
Yeah,
So that's interesting. You bring that up.
it's true.
good
And I
point.
think a certain attitude of rebellion would go a long way is
Mm-hmm.
to like, I want to be able to decide for myself just like I did when I was a kid.
Yeah. When
you
does
know?
that point come when society will say to AI, nope?
Yeah, no.
And that's the
this
rebellion.
far, no further. You
Yeah.
know?
That's the revolution then. That would be really.
One, I wanted to mention this to you just to get your reaction is, particularly in play-by-play announcing, I've always heard a real musicality in it, like the best. There's that nuance, there's phrasing, there's the dynamics. These are all, words that apply to music.
Right.
Singing or any kind of instrumentation, and I always thought the best play-by-play had all of that in it and felt very musical to me, particularly when the game's really exciting and
Right,
something's
yeah.
going on. RJ was a master of this. Obviously, you're a master of this. Is it something you were ever aware of? Did you ever make that kind of connection?
No, 100%. When I got into the business, well, first of all, let's backtrack to the soundtrack because that's what it is. So
Yeah.
my Elvis Presley, for me growing up in Southern Ontario, we would get Sabres games in our house when they were on over-the-air free TV. So Elvis for me back then was, because of the way he spoke and just the smoothness of his voice, and you already know where I'm going, was Ted Darling.
Yeah, totally.
Ted, I still listen today, and this is the honest truth. Every year I will go back and I will find Ted Darling clips and listen on YouTube to remind myself that not every goal has to be up here when I
Right.
call it. Those moments, same with Rick, they will just happen.
Yeah.
There's other moments where it could be early in the game and it's 2-1, and then we've scored maybe to make it 3-1. And I remember I was very cognizant of this just a couple of games ago where I thought, you don't need to go there, just keep it clean and make it smooth. And that was Ted Darling,
So cool.
just the way he would say, he scores.
Yeah.
And it could be one of the biggest goals. And some people would say, well, he was no Rick Jenneret. Was never meant to be. Nor am I, nor is anybody else.
No.
RJ is up on his platform that he created himself. Yeah. And thank goodness he did, because it's unique and genuine and real from the heart and all that stuff that matters.
Yeah.
The same can be said for Ted Darling. It was just so smooth, so professional. And there were so many great qualities to his call. The other guy for me growing up, was, even though I was growing up in and around Toronto, was Danny Gallivan
Yeah.
on a Hockey Night in Canada. And the thing about Danny that I didn't realize until it was described to me by somebody else was that it always sounded like Danny Gallivan, and this is what I try to do, and I think Ted did it really well too. Not that RJ didn't. RJ to me was a leap off the page when you needed that leap, right? That hook.
Yeah.
What's the hook for the song?
Right.
And without thinking about it, he'd have the hook.
Yeah, he's just an improviser.
Yeah, just improvise, and there's the hook. And you go, you're a genius. That's great. Perfect for the moment. And how'd you come up with that? And we'll get to some of that in a moment. But for me, the Danny Gallivan was, the in over the line. It was more like he's, handle a point with the puck, carrying it. It was if someone described that Danny Gallivan was hovering right on top of the player. So he was riding with the player. So I definitely have taken some of that in mind. So Cousins picks up the puck at center, crosses the line into the corner, looking over, and then I try to see where the next player is. Like, where's the next note in the song? So the other night we had a 3-on-2. And the last two to have the puck, it was a pass, I believe, from Casey Middlestad off the right wing to Greenway, and I saw Benson was at the near post, and that was where the puck was going to go. That's hockey. And it was just bang, 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 and Benson scored, and I just went because it's 18-year-old kid. He's just scored again. Everyone wants another young hero in the town, and so far he's been impressive.
Definitely.
So that's one that I really felt I was hovering. I could see it. I was riding with them.
Yeah.
So there is something to that. Definitely the whole thought of how music would connect with play-by-play calling. So it's a creativity, it's a freedom. Also I found out, certainly since getting here and working, I don't want to say in the shadow of Rick, but certainly, I felt many times when Rick wasn't calling the game and it was me, and I've said this publicly before, I didn't want to feel like I was letting anybody down because it's such, it's, let's say, pick someone, pick a lead singer and he or she can't sing for their band that night, but they found a substitute because they didn't want to cancel the show. And you're walking out there thinking, well, everybody wants
right. You're right. Whatever.
Whoever your lead singer is here and they're not here. But that's how I felt for a lot of times.
I wondered if there was going to be a David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar thing here.
Not so much.
Actually, Sammy's probably the better singer.
Well, vocally, David didn't know the words half the time. But anyway, sorry. It's okay. That's how I felt many times. And I always felt that just don't disappoint. Don't let him down. Don't let him down. And I had to fight through that, You
have come out the other side.
Nothing Rick ever did. Trust me, this is nothing Rick ever did. Working with Joe Bowen in Toronto, he's in the Hall of Fame, was the same way. It was always, you're step as far as being in the moment with these people, but you're not, they're in the Hall of Fame. And you're the other guy. So there was always, I always said if I wrote a book, that would be the title of my book was The Other Guy. Yeah.
They didn't start in the Hall of Fame though, did they?
No, they didn't. And you remind yourself of that. But, musically, I find that my connection to a confidence that I know is in me, and it's always been there, is trust your creative thoughts. So they don't always come out the way you want them to. And that's, I think, where I was going with the thought was that it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
So there's a call that I've said many times recently. Alex Tuck was barreling down the right wing, and I did the John Lennon. Yeah. Tuck roaring like a truck down the wing, and I thought, Tuck like a truck. I don't know. After the game, I just went, I don't know. I don't know.
I like it.
So, but you know what I mean? You judge your work. You're like, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
And you're right. Other people might have said, that's fine. Don't sweat it. But,
it feels like you're in it. You're in the moment, when you're feeling it.
But there definitely is a correlation. And back to your Tragically Hip mention that, so this was not long after Gord had passed away that I wanted to find a way to honor him because I knew the connectivity with Buffalo to the hip, from knowing that they've been here many times, knowing about Strictly Hip and other bands that probably, play their music and that have come through our arena, actually, now that we have bands in there, which is really cool.
Very cool.
But I thought I need to connect this because there are some people that are hurting out there because they lost someone who they really dearly love, even if they never knew him, but they felt his presence. And I didn't meet him to speak to him. I saw him pretty up close by his trailer once, but I never got to speak to him. But there's just an aura about him of just a regular dude, and he was wearing his silver. He was doing his own thing at this time on this
the
tour.
solo tour.
He had his silver kind of spaceman suit on and stuff. And I'm thinking, I want one of those suits. This is so cool and everything else. So I wanted to find the connectivity, and then sure enough, Lonely End of the Rink. And I thought, wow. And this is where you learn lessons that you don't realize. Joe Bowen in Toronto would have his way of introducing goaltenders. So he'd always come up with a different way, and he still does, of the minders of the twine entrapments or something.
Wow.
He would just throw, and it'd be different all the time.
Clever.
He'd just come up with this stuff. And I'm thinking, that's really cool. But I can't do that because now he's doing that.
Right. You got to find your thing.
So then my thing was, I thought, at the Lonely End of the Rink, let's introduce the goalies that way. And it kind of starts the night off. And then I started getting all this response on social media about thanks for doing it. And I thought, well, then that's the impact you want to have.
It meant a lot.
It's all about Gord and hip fans and stuff. I didn't do it for me to be recognized, but I was feeling too, how do I honor this guy?
Yeah.
It's
just very classy
in our own
and
artistry,
cool and
he's
appropriate.
And he's such a hockey fan.
Totally.
I say he is because his energy is still
big time.
Yeah, I still very much feel that way just about life in general, that our energy is still here, even if our body is not. So, Gord's energy, I think, is here every second of every day with especially hip fans. They feel
definitely.
Same with John and the Beatles. It's still here.
Definitely.
Still here. So.
I did get to know Gord a little bit.
Did you? Yeah.
And he is, as you describe him, just genuine, fascinating, a real intellect, but
there's some
good heart.
I mean, you mentioned David Lee Roth earlier. There's some interviews, right, that you want to hear.
Yeah.
David is one because you're thinking, where's this going to end up?
Oh, man.
He gets that look in his eye. He's like, and even right now, if he sat here with us, he'd blow us away. We don't. Where was that coming from? We might not agree with some of it.
It's like a jazz saxophone half the time. I mean, he can go.
Yeah, and then Gord was the other one where I really want to hear what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but I really care about what you're thinking.
The poet.
And then the more we got to know the man or the human being as much as we were allowed to know him behind the poet, and then understanding what causes he stood for and the way he envisioned the world and how we should be good to each other, that just made you even more fan of the group. And
no question, man.
But the person individually. So.
And it's a great way to honor him.
Yeah.
We're all glad here that you did that.
Cool, good. Yeah, it'll keep going.
Yeah.
Especially when it's Game 7 and we win the Stanley Cup. That'll be the first words out of the...
I like hearing that.
So, yeah.
Well, we covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure we can cover a lot more. But I'd like to know, maybe what you're listening to these days. I know it's the Beatles, but if there's anything else. And in general, I'd like to know if music has helped you through, difficult times. I know you've had them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you were able to lean on music and
every day.
Get some sustenance and
every day.
Yeah,
every day. When my wife was diagnosed with her rare cancer, we weren't. It went from, and anyone who's been through it, where you walk in a doctor's office and after a colonoscopy, and then you're told that you have cancer. It freezes you a little bit, but then you also, at least I did. I thought, okay, well, how do we beat this? I mean, it's not that bad, right? I mean, people can get cancer and you're cured in a couple of years or whatever. And then when you're told it's rare and it has a 90% recurrence and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you start to sink in your chair a little bit more and your heart and everything just because you can't help your partner.
Yeah.
You can be there for him. There's no doubt the music helped her and helped me. Losing my parents too over the last couple of years. We all go through that phase in life where all of a sudden some much sooner. So I'm grateful for the years that certainly we had. Music gets you through that. Sometimes you can't even explain how it does, but it certainly does. But I go back to how every day I'm walking around the house singing something. It's just there. The guitar is much like your studio here. You've got people can't see it that much, or maybe they can in the shot. You got a PV amp over your left shoulder there. And I've loved the sound of PV amps ever since I first saw one. It was really, I don't have one yet. I have a Vox and I have a Marshall, but.
Wow, you're doing fine, man.
Yeah, well, that's it. But that's the beauty too, right? You just keep adding on.
Oh, it never ends.
But yeah, music definitely gets you through everything.
Yeah.
That and my dog, Bandit, and his little brother, Timmy. and my other husky who passed away years ago. His name is Leaf. I have Leaf tattooed right here. I have Bandit right here. And they ride with me. We have some bumpy flights in the wintertime, as you can imagine, with the Sabres. And there's moments I just close my eyes and I say, Bandit, buddy, get me home. And then after that, it's just put music on. Yeah. And as soon as you do that, you're into the music.
Yeah.
It's really cool
like
what
exhaling.
music can do. Yeah. So you can be bumping around, you're jelly beaned in the air, and then you're just listening to whatever. It could be from Dave Matthews to Van Halen or whatever. To your question about what I'm listening to now, aside from the Beatles. So here's one that'll blow your mind. I bought my first Beatles album just, I don't know, 2 months ago.
You're kidding.
No, isn't that crazy?
What'd you get?
But you know what is
your
so
first one.
Let It Be.
Awesome.
But what's so exciting, I also bought a Rolling Stones album last year where it's the Stones before they were the Stones.
Yeah.
It's all this really bluesy stuff, and there's a country song on it. It's got, I forget the name of the album. It's got an orange cover on it. I bought it down at Revolver downtown.
Vinyl? Are you buying vinyl?
Yeah, vinyl. Yeah,
I thought so.
And my wife got me a player, so vinyl.
That's awesome.
And I want to upgrade too. I said, hey, I love what you got me, but I want to find something with a really smart needle and just make it pop. But that for me too, what I'm really embracing about this whole Beatles thing is how it's turned me into a kid again, because again, yes, I've had CDs of the Beatles. So, their hits and all this stuff. And I think I did have a couple other albums on CD, but I don't count that the same as buying
going out specifically
the album,
to go buy the album,
flipping through and nope, this one. And I got to a point after really getting hooked on this Beatles channel where I thought I need to buy them all.
Yeah,
like where are you, especially on the channel, where are you getting this from? And then they would tell you, well, this is on the B side of only 60,000 copies of this and all this stuff. So I'm learning. But I love the innocence of where I'm at now with the band.
Yeah.
And it really is. It's like a kid when you first hooked onto it.
I want to go relive it.
I'm into all that now, thinking I either should feel embarrassed, foolish, or just this is the time.
Grateful.
This is when it was going to happen. The rock and roll side of me, which will always be there. And I like telling this story. Years and years ago in Kitchener, Ontario, there was an outdoor concert bill that a buddy of mine, Mike Tyler, who was a rock DJ down in Niagara here for a while and also up in Toronto for a bit. He invited me out to the show, and he said he had passes to go, kind of behind the fence, because it was an outdoor thing. So you're not really backstage, as you're in the fenced area where all the tents are and stuff. Yeah. And it was an Aerosmith show with Slash, and the Slash's band, his side band.
Oh, that's Slash's Snake Pit?
I don't think it was Snake Pit yet. So, but when we get to the end, I'll let you, this is how it's all going to tie in, which is a really neat musical story about, again, innocence, and if I had only known back then. Backstage, I'm with Mike, and Steven Tyler walks by, and I watched the way Steven Tyler greeted people that worked at the facility. We're talking security people and all this stuff. He was hugging, he was talking, he was just the most amazing human being that I could have ever hoped he would be. Now, it doesn't mean he doesn't have his things.
Issues, yeah.
But the Steven Tyler that day that I saw how he treated people that were working the event that were not able to really see the show because they're backstage at a gate, he actually took, 15, 20 minutes at a time talking to him and just thought, this is unbelievable. And then
that's cool.
You're very aware of a Canadian band called Coney Hatch.
I am.
Right? So
good friend of mine is their bass player.
Right. So and a hockey player and all this stuff. So we met backstage, courtesy of Mike, and we're talking about his love of hockey and everything else. And I had mentioned, oh my, Coney Hatch. I grew up listening to you guys in Norville, Ontario. You came and played a bar that I saw you at, and Hey Operator and Monkey Bars and all these songs. I said, I know them all. So then this another person came walking up. It was a shorter, I'm only saying this, like not as small, but I don't know, like if I say 5'2", I'll be fair. I don't know. I could be wrong on the height. And we were introduced and said, this is Miles Kennedy. Oh my God. And at the time, I didn't know who Miles Kennedy was because I was a fan of Guns, but I didn't have all the Guns N' Roses out. I wasn't sure about Axl.
Yeah.
So I'm all about good people.
Mm-hmm.
So when I heard what Axl was doing from time to time, and Axl, I know you've changed, so good on you for that. And it's your own life to tell. But I wasn't someone who was going to buy a concert ticket for a guy that was going to be 2 hours late for a show or something. That was me as a kid growing up. I thought, no, not into it. So I I knew who Guns were. I liked their music, but I never jumped in, right? I never took the dive. So I meet this guy, Miles Kennedy, and, I was told, this guy's got the best voice ever. And I'm thinking, oh, good for you. Congrats. Hope you have a great career and stuff. And then they went off, and then Slash's band came on, and it was with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. And they did their show, and I didn't pay any 2 cents to the name of the band or anything else, but now I know them, not because of that day, but I since picked up, especially during the pandemic when we're all stuck at home, I picked up on this group and really dug into Slash. And I mean, bought they put out a DVD of one of their concerts. I'm buying their albums. I'm just all over it thinking, hey, this guy can sing. And it's like, holy cow, I met him. I didn't even know this was him.
It's so funny.
This is
you didn't know
weird.
it was him.
And I would have asked him so many more questions. And then their bass player, Todd Kearns, is from Winnipeg, I believe. And we started talking over social media during the pandemic again. I just sent him a note. I think like I sent you a note on social media. I just said, Todd, I just want to let you know that you are an amazing, I didn't know he's Canadian. I said, you are an amazing bass player. Your background vocals for this and Miles are just perfect. Very Van Halen-ish, right?
Very much.
Michael Anthony to whatever. He has that pitch that matches what Miles does, who can go up here too or down here. So I just reached out and said, I just want to let you know, I'm a nobody, but you guys are doing a really good thing. Love it. And in an era where there's not a lot of heavy metal, rock, guitar, they're out there. I just haven't found them, but I've found some lately digging. But they kind of inspired me to keep digging. No, they're out there.
Very cool.
To your point about we're not really listening to those radio stations anymore, so they're not getting played on a Q107 as much. Classic rock stations are sticking with the classic rock, right? And then diving into Slash and watching how he plays guitar and listening to how he plays guitar.
He's something.
Unreal. I mean, blowing my mind. So that's where I'm at now with Slash, is that I saw him live a few times. I've seen that band live. I saw Slash just play at a guitar event somewhere in New York City. We were on the road, and he came out and just started playing some blues and jamming, and I thought, oh, my God. For a guy that has looks like big hands.
He does,
chunky fingers, and he's so clean. And
he is. He's got a really nice touch.
Yeah, exactly. His touch on the guitar actually inspired me. And I'm thinking, not that I could be Slash, but I'm thinking, all right, I have tiny hands, but this guy's got fingers that look like they're baseball bats, and he's nailing these notes. And here's the other thing that we'll mention before we go. If I see an artist that's so into their music, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So Slash is one. When he's playing, that guy's 100% committed.
In it, yeah.
Eddie was the same way.
Oh.
It didn't matter what Dave was doing, and that's why they didn't get along half the time. Eddie was in his own world, smiling, jumping all over the place. I love this guy. And then the other artist that I was never into and then saw once on an MTV channel or in Much Music in Canada while I was at a hotel room somewhere covering something was Dave Matthews.
Yeah.
So Dave Matthews, I'd never sunk anything into as far as getting to know him. And then I watched him perform live it was on TV. I thought, who's this guy? Everything he just sang came right from everything he is.
Oh, there's no question.
And I jumped all the way in on him and Tim Reynolds, and I bought that double CD set where they're playing guitar together. I'm like, wow.
Did you ever get to see him live?
Blew my mind. I've seen Dave live, yeah. I didn't see him and Tim perform live. But, John Bonamassa, same kind of, you watch those guys play and you're just blown away.
Oh, yeah. So there's so much.
There's so much we could get into. It's crazy, man. I could talk like this all day. I love it.
Well, we're going to have to do it again.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you.
No, thanks for having me. This is a highlight. Yeah, this is a highlight, awesome. Man. Seriously.
We will do it again.
Yeah.
And I know you're getting ready for a season.
Yeah. 100%. And you're wearing the Dead Sabres shirt there, which I should shout out to our producer, Joe Pinner, who's a massive Deadhead and a big fan.
I hope I get to meet Joe.
You should meet Joe wearing that shirt. Yeah. I remember seeing there was I don't know, it was Time or someone had a magazine about the Grateful Dead, whatever anniversary it was. And I remember I saw that somewhere and I had to pick it up and I bought it for Joe. And
that's cool.
But here's the other thing. I've never given them 10 minutes of my time other than what was played on Top 40 radio. I will get by in that stuff.
Yeah.
I haven't taken the dive, and I know when I do, I will be so in.
You will.
So, but that's cool for me. I'm really excited about it. Yeah, I'm really excited about it because I was the same with Seinfeld. I never watched Seinfeld growing. I knew it was there, but I didn't. But then I started diving into Seinfeld, thinking this is really funny stuff right here.
Right.
So I'm kind of a late bloomer in that
But it's never
type
too,
of thing.
you know?
It's actually made life really cool because
It's
now
cool.
at this stage in life, all that stuff that is really golden, whether it's music or comedy or any kind of artistry. I've
been playing guitar for 40 years and there's always more.
What was the first one you
learn.
bought?
First guitar I ever had? It was a copy of a Gibson Melody Maker, like almost a no name. The first good guitar I ever had that I bought with my own money was a Gibson SG.
Oh, nice.
That I got. I mean, you can get a guitar for about $225,
Right.
a decent one. Oh, I should have hung on to it. I'm from Massachusetts, the Berkshire Mountains area, and then we moved when I was around 11 to the Albany, Saratoga region, New York. So I bought it at a place in Clifton Park, New York, which is like a suburb of Albany.
Okay.
I moved to Buffalo in 1990.
Yeah.
Home, though. I feel like I'm from here.
What color is that guitar?
What was that?
What color is that guitar?
It was a natural wood grain.
Okay.
Finish that looked very much like one Frank Zappa played, I loved Frank Zappa. So I got that. And, you end up like, I'm going to trade this in and get something else, make a lot of bad decisions about gear when you're, 15 or 14.
Yeah. That's the thing. I can't imagine giving up any.
Now I just keep them all.
Yeah, same here. So after that Barracuda Strat, the $150 package, I went to a store in Canada and I saw a wood grain Godin Type 2 iconic, and it was $1,000, I think, or $1,200 or something. Oh yeah, I looked at it and I thought that one.
Yeah,
that one, and I wasn't even near good enough to understand what I was going to be playing, but had a little nick in the back, so they took some money off, and I wouldn't even have seen it.
That's a guitar you could grow into.
Yeah,
forever.
I love playing it all. Yeah, so
So
that's turned into that and a Bigsby and
you have a Gretsch.
And I have a Gibson Firebird, which I took an amp into a store, which I didn't know if my Marshall amp was working properly. Again, I'm so green about it all. I took my amp in and I said, "Can you just let me know, is this working right or is there a hiss there? Should I fix something?" He said, "Well, there are hisses in tube amps." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but this is different. Won't go away." And he said, "Well, all right, let's check it out. Go get me a guitar," he said to one of the guys in the shop. And the kid came back with a Ferrari red Firebird Gibson.
Oh my God.
And as soon as he put it in his hand, I looked at Brendan and I said,
I need that.
"Oh my gosh.
I'm in love.
I'm going to buy that guitar." It was $2,000 right there in the spot. And I thought, "Here's the credit card."
Oh, they get you every time.
I know, man. That's awesome. Anyway.
Awesome. Dan, we're going to do this again.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for everything. We're grateful you're here in Buffalo very much.
Appreciate it. I'm grateful you're here too, man.
In the community and as Sabres fans, all of it.
Awesome.
So let's go Buffalo.
Let's go Buffalo.
Sabres.
Right
I feel
on.
good.
Right
go
on.
Bills. And thank you, Dan Dunleavy, for being here with me. And until next time, man.
Thanks,
you, buddy.
Appreciate it.